I'm going to call the July 20th meeting of the Budget Advisory Committee to order. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Bergman?
Here.
Ms. Hall? She's trying to find parking. Ms. Major?
Here.
Ms. Ailes?
Here.
And Ms. Howard may or may not be here. She had an appointment, so it got done early. She would be in.
Do we have a quorum?
We do.
Thank you. I guess you're up first, Ron.
Well, good evening, committee. Well, we wanted to first, go over a couple slides with you that have been brought before the board since your all's last meeting. And then there's been there's been two budget workshops now. There was one on the 12th, and then there was one just this past Tuesday on the 18th. So we wanted to go over the presentation that was on the 12th to the Budget Board of Commissioners. As you know, but you probably know this, the first proposed budget book was May 26. I talked about your all's meetings with going through with the department heads on their budgets. We made some revisions to the budget, and now we revised the budget as July 7, 2023. And both of the revised budgets are on the city website, what I call the executive summary, and the other one that's the more three-ring binder detail if you need it. For the board, I just tried to describe some of the things that are in each budget book. The three-ring book detail is a lot of detail. It's basically four reports is put together by funds, with the revenues, expenditures, justification of expenditures, and personnel schedules. And then there's the executive summary, which has a lot more information. It takes all that detailed information for the 1 year, but it also has prior year information. It has information on personnel, property values, millage rate, debt, community profile, and a lot of other summary reports for each fund level. And I tried for the board just to highlight in yellow there what were important reports, if you just wanted to get a glance and get an idea of the budget, where to look, like the executive summary, budget message. And we've also added in the strategic plan with the goals and objectives, and then the major revenue sources of the city. If you want to know the major revenue sources, a description of it, a little history of it, starts on page 27 of that book. And then the description of the CIP. In the very back of the executive summary is the CIP. So I want to just highlight some pages that were back in the CIP section. The one page that's really good is that it's highlighted in yellow is the CIP summary, pages 338 to 339. If you want to see all the CIP projects for the 5 years, they're all listed out on the 5 pages on each year from 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Getting into the budget as it currently is, it's now a budget of $76 million. It's highlighted in yellow there, $76,310,953. It's an increase of $624,000 over the previous adopted budget from last year. And then down below, I'm just trying to show the largest funds, which is the general fund, a budget of $33 million. The general fund is 43% of the total city budget. Then going down, there's a water and sewer fund coming in at $20 million. The sanitation fund at $8 million. Penny fund at $4 million. The ARPA fund is $177,000. I just sort of wanted to highlight that because last year I budgeted a placeholder because the ARPA was just starting of about $3 million. So what I plan on doing, I told the board, is I took out I did budget this year was in the first budget run of about $3 million, because what I'm going to do is bring the ARPA projects forward on a budget resolution, the first one in the new year. So I'll have the exact balances that are being carried forward into the new year. And then the stormwater fund at $2 million, and then the golf course fund just a tad under $2 million. So those 7 funds right there are $70 million of the $76 million budget. They're almost 92% of the budget. And like I say, if you go across the funds, you see the percent of the budget, last year's approved budget, the increase, decrease, and then the percentage changes from the previous year. What changed from the original budget book when you went through with the departments, as I probably might have said, but the original budget was $80,985,000. Now it's a $76 million. It went down $4.6 million. And the bulk of us, I took the ARPA out because there was sort of a placeholder in there. And I think I had a concern when we had the first public hearing, it was like a preliminary budget hearing, and I think the board saw the $80 million for the budget. And I go, I put in a placeholder of 3 million. I go, I don't know if I should have that in there. So I talked to city manager, said, no, take that out. So I brought it back down, and we made some other things. Department heads went into their budgets and cut up between 1 and 1.5% of their operating expenditures. Finance, Shane and I went into the budget and tried to see if there's anything else sticking out that we should adjust for, and we went through that. Capital adjustments were made, especially in the water and sewer fund. We're going through a water and sewer revenue study right now, and we're trying to reduce some capital in there because of the increase in the operating costs. So we've got the operating costs going up in the water and sewer fund, so we're decreasing the capital in the water and sewer fund. And then from your budget book that you saw, the pay increases were funded from 3% to 5%. Some of the assumptions in the budget, we have 3 funded SAFER grant positions. We have 3 funded by county. The county wanted to start at the last half of the year, starting April 1st. It's the first time they're funding these 3 positions, which are for our new rescue transport vehicle that I don't think we're going to get for another year or so. Yeah, but they're going to start funding it for us. It'll be funded annually thereafter, but they wanted to sort of wean us into it, so they just did the 6 months for this year, starting April 1st. And as I mentioned, pay increases for general employees, we funded 5%. The police and fire unions in the budget at 5%. Health insurance, dental insurance, we estimated 10% increase. We think we're going to get those actual premium pretty soon, so we'll know that. We're hoping it's a little under the 10%. And then the police, for the pensions for police and fire, we've got the actuary required contributions for the city, police $829,000, fire $588,000. And then the general employees defined contribution plan is just the 9% for the off-year wages for the general employees. And workers' comp, we budget 10% increase. Property insurance, we did 50%. HR director a couple months ago told us a lot of these rates were increasing with the hurricanes down south of us and stuff. So we budgeted 50% increase. We don't know what the actual premium is going to be yet. And then liability insurance, we budgeted a 10% increase. Now, I know there's a bunch of numbers on here, but just to put some dollar amounts to them, with the new positions. And what I'm trying to show here is the new positions at the top, the total cost to the city, and then the general fund portion. So the cost of the new positions for the total city is $401,000, but for the general fund it's $142,000. We've got the SAFER grant is in its own separate fund. It's not part of the general fund. But after the 3 years, it'll be folded into the general fund because the grant goes for 3 years. The pay increases at the 5%. We've got the cost of the increase, almost 1.3 million total city. 910,000 of that is the general fund. And then we got the health, dental, and life insurance increases with the cost for total city, 438,000. And then I thought I'd show in the middle column there what is the total cost of the insurances, which come to 4.8 million for health, dental, and life. And then the general fund portion at 285,000. And then the retirement plans, the cost of the increase, the total cost, and then the general fund portion. Workers' comp, same thing, the cost, total cost, and then the total city cost, total cost, and then the general fund portion. And then down the last one is property liability insurance, of course, the cost for total city, the total cost of the insurances, and then the general fund portion. So I know it's a lot of numbers up there and stuff.
Those big ones at the bottom, do we have an idea when you're going to get those numbers?
Like the health, dental, and life, or?
Yes. The property and liability more than anything.
We haven't heard yet, but we have heard of the health insurance. I think is going to come before the board. We think we've heard maybe 7% on the health insurance and 0% on the dental. But those are the only 2 we've heard about so far. So I'm just trying to show in a dollar amount, how much the costing for the increases, the main drivers of the increases in the budget. For the total city, this is the revenues by type, and highlighted their charges for services at 45%. It's the highest category, followed by taxes at 30%. Just comparing those same revenues going from 2023 to 2024, taxes, we've got the $1.9 million increase in taxes. That's mostly the property taxes at about $1.4 million. And then you got permits and fees, intergovernmental charges for services. Charges for services, the main thing is sort of spread across funds. The biggest one of that 1.5 million that's highlighted there was 500,000 for the in the sanitation fund. That's the since the contract went up with waste management, that's the increase for that. So it's like 500,000 in waste management. I think there was 300,000 in water and sewer, 300,000 in general fund, and a couple $100,000, I think, in stormwater. With the so it's sort of spread across, but the highest one was the sanitation contract. And then we had fines and forfeitures, interest. We're seeing a better rate of return on our investments this year. Miscellaneous, and then non-revenues, transfers, reserves, and so far, even if you're looking at, the budget in total is going up to 624,000. So it's not the 4 million it was before, but 624,000 for a 0.83% increase. And this is just showing total city expenditures by type. And as you can see, personnel services highlighted there are 45%. And it's followed by operating at 33%, and then capital at 12%. And then this is just showing the numerical value for the for those same expenditure categories for personnel, operating, capital, and the biggest increase is the personnel at the 2.4 million, which is mostly wages, health, life, and dental, and the pension contributions. Operating expenses, we're seeing a big increase in our operating expenses, so that's that 2 million there for that, and 5 million for capital. Mostly that is we've saw almost, I think it's 1.8 million reduction in capital in the water and sewer fund, and the balance is 3 million from the ARPA fund that we had in there last year, in last year's budget. Getting to the general fund, it has an increase in budget of 2.1 million or 6.87%. The general fund revenues, the biggest category is taxes, highlighted there at 56%, followed by looks like charges for services at 11%. Expenditures by function. The biggest category there is public safety at 55%, then followed by general government at 20%. And then expenditures by type, and this is where personnel services are the biggest category of the general fund at 71%, and followed by operating at 24%. The millage rate. When we first met with the first budget book, we heard the estimate was 12.33% increase in taxable values. It went down. We got the certified values on July 1st. It went down to 11.67%. It was about $80,000 reduction in revenues in the general fund, so not too bad. That's still bringing in total property tax revenues of 13.8 million to the general fund, and that's 41.6 of the general fund budget. Next week, on July 25th, as required by state statutes, the city needs to decide what the proposed maximum millage rate is. And the city is going to go with, it's being advised to leave it at 5.37, but the board will assign the DR 420s that go to the state what our city's proposed maximum millage rate is. You might have seen this graph many, many times, and I'm not sure if I showed it to you before, but it's just what's making up the ad valorem revenues. It's the millage rate in the top left graph. We're showing the history from 2007 of our millage rate. The taxable values on the far top right graph, showing the taxable value in the very top right there, the almost 2.8 billion taxable value. You take those two together, the millage rate and the taxable value, and then that gives you the revenue in the bottom graph. So as you can see, from 2008 to 2013, we did have that, I think they called it the Great Recession back then, where the taxable values for the first time, I think they went down in value, which also decreased our revenues by 1.5 million. So that's just a snapshot of the revenue calculation for ad valorem. The city also likes to compare us to the other full-service cities. Those are the ones with populations above 20,000 that have their own police and fire departments, and Tarpon's on the far left there. And we're trying to compare 2017 to 2023. And as you can see, some of the cities have gone up some since then. Tarpon went down a little bit, but we are the lowest millage rate in the brown bars of all the full-service cities, of the 5 of them. Getting to the CIP, this is just breaking out the $8 million of CIP by the different categories. You've got the public safety at almost 2.8 million, and physical environment 2.8 million, transportation almost 1.6 million, and cultural and recreation 825,000. And this is listing all the CIP all that makes up that 8 million. Starting with public safety, we've got the police vehicles at 475,000, the fire vehicle 60,000. We got the reserve for construction for Station 70, 1.3 million. We got the Motorola radio system for fire for 301,000, and we got the 3 debt services for the 3 fire trucks. For water and sewer, I just sort of lumped them all together based on water and sewer, because there's a lot of items that's 100,000, 200,000, instead of trying to list all of them. So water capital projects, about almost 1.5 million. Sewer capital projects, 1.2, for a total of 2.6 million. Stormwater has some pipelining they're going to do for 134,000, and they're requesting a vehicle of 66,000. And then transportation related, there's annual sidewalks, 100,000. Brick Street Road reconstruction, 300,000. River Bayou dredging, 1.1 million. A couple CRA items, flex pave and landscape improvements. And then culture and recreation, which Sunset Beach Pavilions, 50,000. Mother Mary's Park, 25,000. Library improvements, 500,000. Golf course, 50,000 for conceptual design on the clubhouse, and then 200,000 for tee box reconstruction. Now, Carrie at the library is hopeful that she's been trying to get a grant for the last few years, but she says she's on the list now, so she might finally get her library improvements for the library there. She's going for a grant, so it's going to be $1 million total, 500,000 from the city, and the grant would be 500,000. Since most of the capital is in the penny fund, I just thought I'd show the expenditures, a 5-year projection of the penny fund. A lot of those same items are on the under 2024 for the fire station, the police vehicles that I just read off. And what I'm trying to show there is here are the projects in the penny fund, and really if you go down to the bottom, to help them out, what fund balance is remaining. So in the penny fund for 2024, highlighted in yellow, is like $4 million of projects out of the penny fund. And then, but as you see, if you go across on the bottom row there, you have 1.5 million available still in the penny fund in 25, 4.5 in 26, and so forth. But I'm sure they might find projects for that. But wanted to show the CRA fund to the board, and this was all the expenses of the CRA fund for the 5 years, the personnel operating, the capital, the grants, the repayment to the sanitation fund, the last one, and the fund balance reserve. And I was just trying to tell the board that if they have some more projects, I highlighted in yellow, there's 368,000 plus the 301,000 still in the fund balance, so they have a little over 600,000 available in the CRA fund. And the last slide, I was just trying to show them, okay, here's the meeting dates going forward. Last week's the 18th. Next Tuesday, we set the maximum millage rate. The 27th, the 3rd budget workshop. And if needed, there'll be one on August 3rd. And then the trim notices go out August 21st, a Monday. September 6th would be the first public hearing on the tentative millage and budget. And then September 20th would be the second and final public hearing on the budget. And by October 1st, we start the new year with the new budget. So that's the presentation. Any questions on that? Or?
The cutting of the expenses 1 to 1.5% was the reason for that to balance out the increase 3 to 5% on the personnel side. Was it to help offset that, or?
It was part of that. Just we're seeing the expenses coming up. So yes, it was part of that. Just see. Plus, there's some other items they've been talking about too. So just cut a little bit out of the budget there. It ended up being about $320,000 out of the general fund.
Any other questions for Ron on this presentation? I think you have another one.
Yes. I don't know if you saw this one.
No, this one I haven't. I saw the other two.
Oh,
The other one. I spent about 6 hours watching those meetings, so.
You're just trying to torture yourself.
Actually, it was interesting, informative, and perplexing.
That's a good way of putting it. How this came about, the debt overview capital funding, a couple months ago, it got direction, and I think the board, well, they wanted me to give them an overview of the debt and some funding alternatives, but they also involved Commissioner Koulianos to be involved in it. So we worked together. And we put in one presentation. My first yellow slides, as I call them, is what I put together. And then at the end is what he put together. So I'll start to go through that. Just to show the current funding, the debt of the city, we've got the water plant bond highlighted in yellow there. We've got, at the end of last year, we still have $28.6 million of principal left. Debt service is about a little over $2 million, $2,040,000 a year. The interest rate on the bond is 3.59. It was funded by the Water and Sewer Fund. This bond was a public offering. It's callable now, just was it available, he called. But it's currently not a good time to do it. I talked to our financial, I've been in contact with him a few times the last couple months. But he said it's not a good time. Interest rates have gone back up. But he has a little ticker list for all his clients and stuff. So he says if there is a good time and rates do go down, which sometimes they are talking about that. I don't know, the Fed's thinking about raising the rates, interest rates maybe a couple more times, but they keep saying they're going to go down. But I keep thinking a year ago, a little over a year ago, a year and a half ago, they said rates wouldn't get up. They were projecting 1.5%, and they ended up going to 5%. So, you know, I guess it depends on whose crystal ball you're looking at. But so that's the water and sewer utility debt. And the other debt the city has is we have 3 fire truck capital leases, sort of staggered out. You know, every couple years, and highlighted in yellow is the balances on each of them. The last truck we still don't have, but we should be getting that soon. And the total capital lease is at $2 million on those. This, as I say, the city has kept debt financing at a minimum, and Mark and I have looked at it. We look at other cities, and we don't have much debt. We've looked at Dunedin, Clearwater, and Dunedin in particular is doing a lot of financing, but so we don't have much debt for the city. Besides, the biggest one is the utility system revenue bond. When we did the utility system revenue bond, we had a credit rating of Standard & Poor's at AA-, and they reaffirmed that rating last November. They did a survey. I had to provide them a bunch of information on our finances, and they came back and said, well, they're reaffirming the AA-. They also said they were, impressed that, we had a good fund balance. And they said, they'll resurvey in a couple years. And they said, it could possibly go up, AA- to just a AA. So it was good news to say that how they reaffirmed the rating. It seemed like we were strong and stable is how they termed it. Informational, I just said telling the board that anything over 10 years has to go out for referendum per the city charter, any financing over 10 years. You can do 10 years without going before the public, but over 10 years you have to go out for referendum. Why do local governments issue debt? Well, if you don't have it in the budget, you've got to look for the money for it. Mitigate rising construction costs. We know that, along with our operating costs going up the last year and a half, our capital costs on these projects have doubled and tripled. You can do pay-as-you-go, or you can have future ratepayers pay it, who benefit from the capital project, when you do financing. And historically, interest rates for municipalities are low because it's tax exempt. The different type of financial instruments offered for the governments are private offering or a public offering. Private offering is what it is, it ends up being a bank loan. We bid it out to the banks, and the bank that offers the lowest interest rate gets the loan. The advantages are there are shorter timeline to receive the loan, maybe 3 months approximately. Lower issuance costs, usually about $50,000, and that's basically to the attorneys. The bond counsel, the financial advisor, and the city attorney are the three, plus there's some bank fees. They're good for smaller projects and financing up to 15 and 20 years. Our financial advisor said that, the banks really don't prefer to go longer than 20 years on the bank loans. The public offering, that's where the government sells bonds to the public, like our water or utility revenue bond that we have. Usually do those for a longer time, right? I mean, it's a longer timeline to receive the loan, especially if you have to go out for referendum. Higher issuance costs. They're good for larger projects and financing up to 30 years. The type of bonds out there are revenue bonds, which is, a revenue bond is backed by just one source, like say the penny fund. You could just get a bond. We have done some in the past where you get a revenue bond, it's just backed by the penny revenues. And then there's something called covenant to budget and appropriate that's come up the last few years, and I know some cities like Clearwater and Dunedin have done it. They're for general revenues. It's not enterprise funds, but it's all your general revenues it encompasses except for ad valorem taxes. So it's backed by all your general revenues. Then you got general obligation bonds, and that's the bond on your ad valorem taxes. And so usually what they do is they'll assess, increase the millage rate a certain portion to pay for that general obligation bond. It's backed by the ad valorem taxes. I got, ran some numbers, compared with our financial advisor. Just some examples for the board. Okay, the top line is, say we did $5 million of financing over 6 years. I chose 6 years because there's only 6 years left in the penny fund. Hopefully it gets renewed. It's been renewed 4 times so far. It goes for 10-year periods. But that's why I did 6 years, because that's only, you can't really do 7, because we really don't know if we're going to get the penny again, but we hope we will. It's usually been passed overwhelmingly. And I had did the 6 years, the 4%, the annual P&I for the top one is $938,000. Total interest on that bond was $632,000, so total debt service was $5.6 million. And on the far right column, just to try to how much would this debt service be of the penny fund revenues? Trying to tell the board, okay, like the first line at the $5 million, it'll take up 25% of the penny fund. So it's still even 75% for other projects. That's what I was trying to show them there. And just going down the line, I gave them an example of $5 million at 10 years. But if we did 10 years, we'd probably have to do the covenant, the budget, and appropriate, because we don't know if the penny fund's going to be renewed, which then would mean you probably have to, for debt service, you'd have to go into the general fund to cover that. And then I showed them $8 million for 6 years. Of course, now when you do the $8 million, 6 years, the annual P&I is going up to $1.5 million. And it's 41% of the penny fund budget. Then did $8 million for 10 years. The annual P&I went down. Total interest is more because we're going out longer at $1.7 million. And then I did $10 million at 6 years and $10 million at 10 years. And of course, the annual P&I is going up to $1.9 million. That was getting that's 51% of the penny fund. That was getting a little bit, I think maybe too much of, I don't know if they'd want to allocate 51% of the debt of the penny fund revenues for debt service every year. So I was just trying to show them different examples for the board and what happens with the debt service and how it affects the penny fund. And then what I did is then I folded 3 of those examples into the penny fund. Yeah, I remember the slide before where you had the penny fund. So I did $5 million at 6 years at 4%, $8 million 6 years 4%, and then $10 million at 10 years for 4%. So this was a penny fund for $5 million, financing for 6 years at 4%. So there's fiscal years 24, 25, 26, 27. Highlighted in blue would be, okay, they took out a loan for $5 million. So the $5 million, I don't know what project, so I just put in blue $5 million. That's say they bought a fire station or they spent it on, or something. So that's the expenditure for whatever they loaned the money for. Then in yellow was the debt service. And then what I'm also trying to, and all down below after that is those expenditures you saw before. They're already plugged in and place items in the penny fund. And down below in green is showing, okay, here's what happens when we spend $5 million on a project. Here's our debt service. Here's how much money is still left in the penny fund, highlighted in green down at the bottom. So you can see in 24 we had 163,000, and 25 604,000, just to show them the effect of doing a loan and how the debt service affects the penny fund. And then I did penny fund 8 million, 6 years, 4%. Okay, well now they got 8 million to spend on projects. Well, but now the debt service has increased to 1.5 million. But in the bottom row for the remaining fund balance, you'll see we've still got the 163,000 the first year, but it's declining with that higher debt service on the out years from 25 through 28. Then I showed them 10 million, 10 years of 4%. You know, same idea, 10 million for capital projects, and then the debt service went down from the previous slide, but it's still up from the very first one. And then the effect on the fund balance at the end of the year on the bottom row in green there. I think this was my last slide to the board to try to, they would have to determine what capital projects you want to be financed. What's the cost of them? And once they tell me that, then I can get back with our financial advisor and say, okay, this is what they want to do. And he would find the best mechanism, financial instrument, you know, for whatever they want to do. I'd also contact the bond counsel because they make sure we do everything in the legal requirements for financing. But I've already been talking to them. I gave them a heads up about a month ago. And so that's where I left off with my debt portion of the financing alternatives. And then Commissioner Koulianos put together his slides. I think what the commissioner was trying to say is, you know, the city needs to be cautious and not go out and do a lot of financing. His first slide here was trying to show the same one before, but his concern was, which is, we don't know, will there be another recession? Will we have something like what happened back in 2008 where the taxable values go down? We still saw the taxable values go up this year, but they were down some, but he's afraid, you know, that has ended and, you know, he's saying homes aren't selling right now and stuff. So he's concerned that, you know, taxable values may go down next year or the year after that. So that was the purpose of his slide there. And then he was, on this slide, you know, with the costs going up, he was trying to show, okay, ARPA funding. On the first column there, we got 12.8 million. We've got almost 12.2 appropriated right now, and there's 612,000 remaining. He's trying to say, you know, all the costs are coming up on all these capital projects. What if some of these projects we're doing of our 12.2 million come in 5% higher in that middle column? Well, that means that 612,000 now goes to 2,700. What if they come in 10% more? So now all of a sudden we don't have enough ARPA money to cover those projects. What we're trying to show here is trying to go back and show, okay, here's the total city budget, 2018 to the proposed one in 2024. We've gone from, you know, 56 million to 76 million budget, you know, a $20 million increase on the budget. It's just trying to show the, you know, how the increases on the budget here, the 8%, 5%, 4%, 2%, 5%. On this slide, and here it's, you know, along with the budget going up, but now we're trying to show on this slide here, we have a fund balance policy in the general fund. And across from his governmental activities budget, that is the expenditure total in the general fund, going from 2018 to 2023, from 24 million to 33 million. The fund balance reserved is based on 20% of that number above there. So he's trying to show from the 20% reserve requirement, we were at 4.8 million in 2018. Now the minimum is at 6.6 million. So the amount of the minimum reserve is going up. And then on the government reserve funds line, that is what we've actually had when we've finished our audit, what money we've had left. We call it unassigned fund balance. You might have heard that term. we've hovered around between 8.6 and 8.8 million the last, I think, 6, 7 years. So it hasn't changed much. And then you go to the last line, and it's trying to show, okay, in 2018, we had 4 million over the minimum in 2018. But now in 2023, we're only 2.1 million. So he's trying to show that, you know, we've been keep our minimum requirements going up. We're keeping our reserve at 8.8 million. So, but we're having less
But
money over the minimum.
I think that's misleading too, because I think if you compare 8.8 million today to 8.8 million 5 years ago, present day value of that 8.8 is no longer 8.8.
Right, right, exactly. Let's see. What the commissioner was just trying to show was he went to a bond site, some bond sales that were out there, and just trying to show that some of these other government issues, Lee County, Jacksonville, Florida, different bond issues that were out there. It looks like a lot of them were at 5%, and the ratings on them. So he was just trying to show the bond issues out there. And in his final summary, he was just trying to say, you know, inflation is going up, we're having cost overruns, increasing operating budget, dropping assessed values, like his first slide where we showed, you know, our taxable value is going to start dropping. Reduction in excess reserves, that was the one slide we just looked at with our minimum and how much are we over the minimum. And then how will this affect the residents, you know, the direct rates to the residents if we got these increasing costs? But then I think that is last slide on that. If you have any questions on debt overview, financing
Did
options.
he suggest that your unassigned balance, that be increased?
It has been talked about. I know, I think last year, when Claire was here, we had when the property taxes were 14%. He was mentioning, should we take some of that money and increase the unassigned fund balance? But it's being talked about.
Okay. Because I think it's time, but yeah, it needs to be looked at.
Yeah. I think I did a presentation for you, and I think I projected it out, and
You did.
and I can't remember if it was what year it was, or was it? Was 2030, where we're getting maybe close to that minimum based on our trajectory. So
Well, the charter's coming up for review, right? So
correct.
that, maybe the charter committee needs to look at raising that 20% to another percent. But what's the driving factor for discussing this debt stuff? Are we having critical projects we're not getting to and we need to finance them, or?
You know, when when ARPA started and they had to try to figure out the projects, it was just it was thrown out there. Well, maybe we can do financing of this. And, you know, I think they had the ARPA projects, but then now they've had, I forgot to tell you, there's those spreadsheets in front of you with the ARPA projects and stuff. But also back on maybe page 3 is like a wish list. They call it the wish list of projects, some of them are still out there. So I think they're looking at alternatives, trying to see, okay, if we needed to, is financing an alternative? But I got the impression from listening to the board, it didn't seem like they wanted to go there. They didn't want to go and do debt financing unless it was desperately needed.
I would say it's only in a
Extreme situation, I think, is it?
They weren't inclined that way, listening to those meetings the other day.
No,
They were not inclined that way at all.
to go for finance. Oh, you listen.
Yeah.
Okay. Which I'm good with. Yeah, but keep my own thoughts out of it.
Any questions on this presentation? Okay, one other item on the agenda. Are you covering that round, the proposed millage rate?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we've got the proposed millage rate going before the board on the 25th. It's just the state requires we set the maximum millage rate. We're at 5.37 now. We've been at that for a few years, as you probably saw in the graph, and we set the maximum. Once you do that, you cannot go over that through the end of the budget process here. I guess you can But from what I've heard from the property appraiser in the state, nobody's ever done that, because if you do something like that, you've got to give written notice and have meetings, written notice to every citizen. So it sets the maximum millage, the proposed maximum millage rate. Management's thought is we want to keep it at the 5.37. I think going below 5.37, we're just afraid, will property taxable values go down? Going above 5.37, I think we start to worry about, okay, the effect, on the residents and stuff, with everything else going on, and the cost of items. But so we're saying management wants to keep it at 5.37. And I think what we're looking for is, if you all want to get your opinion, the Budget Advisory Committee's thoughts on the millage rate, the 5.37.
My opinion is keep it where it is.
I'm inclined to agree, although additional revenue for some of these projects, and rather than financing, might be in order, but I don't see raising it at this point.
Okay.
I agree, keep it where it is. People,
Michelle, is this something, do they
Already
take a vote
struggling.
on this, or?
They can, they can do a recommendation to keep it, at the proposed rate.
Should we do a recommendation, formal recommendation?
Yeah, we could just make a motion to advise the Board of Commissioners that our recommendation is to keep the millage rate at its current level.
one second.
Do a roll call, please.
Ms. Hales?
Yes.
Ms. Major?
Yes,
Mr. Bergman?
Yes. Anything else, Ron?
Just, I don't know, those spreadsheets I left out, those were given to the board last week. We've been sort of working off those ones with the ARPA. What we did a little bit more tweaking to it. On the first page, which lists the ARPA projects that have been approved by the board, we put a timeline, because all ARPA money needs to be obligated. If you look on that first page, I think highlighted in yellow is December 31st, 2024, it needs to be all obligated in a form of purchase order. Money has to be all gone by, highlighted in red column there, is December 31st, 2026. So the board wanted a timeline, so we provided that. The second page has all the ARPA projects and the funding. I don't think that page has changed much. The third page was sort of the wish list, department heads helped put it together, of projects out there that, for the foreseeable future. The fourth page was asked for by the board to give us any projects that haven't been started yet, and we put a list of those down there. I think the thinking was, is there any projects that maybe could be pushed back or something?
But if you have to have it committed, can you actually push some of those?
Well, there's some that nothing has started. There's some that they might be having some issues with, and I think there might be one like Jasmine Sidewalks, they might push out another year or two. So they talked about that.
And what about their comments about the balance left in terms of the increasing cost of these projects?
The balance left.
The part we haven't committed to yet, the 612,000.
Well, there's been talk, not definite, but what has been mentioned is that there's a 1.8 million piece of land that they're thinking about putting on referendum to buying. So part of that would be funded with this 600,000. Now, that's just what I've heard so far.
I'm sorry, what's the purpose of gathering that land?
I'm pardon, what?
I missed what you said, can you say that again?
There's going to be a referendum on, there's a piece of land down by the sponge docks.
Uh-huh,
The proposal is to go before the residents of purchasing this land for 1.8 million.
And what's the
for what reason?
I think it's parking, is for civic functions, is what I've heard.
So then if they do that and use that money and some of these ARPA funds as we go along, if the cost of the projects go up, then how are those funded?
Well, then that's where we might be going back to the penny fund for that. Or if there's any projects that can be delayed and pushed back a year or so.
I was gonna add, Ron, Paul Smith here, there was discussion of maybe a project or two that if it doesn't go or it doesn't look like it's gonna be on schedule or feasible, that would get canceled and, that would, any money overages would be applied from that. There was discussion in the meeting about, for example, the sponge docks. I know several commissioners expressed that solution may not be fully in place, and that that could be one of the projects they consider. Is this really feasible? Is this really going to work as it's supposed to work? And if not, that determination will be made, and that could be one of those projects. But that's to be determined.
That's the Sponge Docks Vault project that's under the ARPA there.
Any questions on the ARPA spreadsheet? Okay, I think that concludes the agenda portion. Are there any public comments? Staff comments? I'm good. I'll have board comments. Any comments from you or you?
No.
Okay, next meeting, is there any need with this budget schedule that you outlined for us to meet before our next regular time?
I wouldn't think so. You know, maybe hopefully closer to the next meeting, we might have more information for you, maybe a revised budget.
You might have some of these numbers you're waiting for by that time.
Probably that, all those estimated increases on the insurances and stuff, and maybe some more for the payroll. We'll have some more personnel cost, whatever the final numbers are, and so, yeah.
Do you know what that date would be in August?
Our next regular meeting here would be August 17th.
Okay. Hopefully by then you'll have some of those numbers. Any input for future agenda items? Seeing none, I'll adjourn the meeting at 2:47.